You know that moment when you realize your entire family has been playing you for a fool? Well, I'm Sarah, and I thought I knew rock bottom when my brother inherited Dad's multimillion-dollar construction company, while I got a single dollar. But what happened next at the will reading? Let's just say my father had been planning the ultimate revenge from beyond the grave. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why karma always finds a way. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. I never thought my own family would spend 16 years systematically destroying my self-worth, but here I am, 28 years old, realizing I've been living a lie my entire adult life. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, and if you've ever been the family scapegoat, the one who always gives, but never receives, then you'll understand my story. For the longest time, I convinced myself that being the forgotten daughter was just my role in the family dynamic. I told myself I was stronger, that I could handle being overlooked because someone had to be the mature one. But looking back now, after everything that's happened, I realize I wasn't being mature, I was being manipulated. It all started when I was 12 years old. My mom had passed away 2 years earlier from cancer, and Dad was struggling to raise me alone. When Linda came into our lives, I was actually relieved. She seemed kind, nurturing, and she brought her 14-year-old son Marcus with her. I thought I was getting the family I'd been missing. But families aren't built overnight, and some people aren't interested in building, they're only interested in taking. The changes started small. Linda suggested that since Marcus was older and going through a difficult transition, he should get the master bedroom upstairs. I was moved to the basement, which Linda redecorated and called Sarah's special space. I remember feeling grateful that she'd made it nice for me, even though it was cold and isolated from the rest of the family. When it came time for college, the financial differences became stark. Marcus got a full ride to an Ivy League school, tuition, room, board, spending money, everything covered by Dad's construction business earnings. I got community college money, and was told I should be practical about my future. When I questioned this, Linda sat me down, and explained that Marcus didn't have his biological father to help him, so Dad was stepping up to fill that role. She made it sound so reasonable, so noble, that I felt selfish for even asking. I threw myself into my studies, graduating summa cum laude with a business degree. I was so proud, so excited to share this achievement with my family. But the graduation celebration I'd dreamed of never happened. Marcus had come home drunk from a party the night before, and had a massive hangover. Linda said we couldn't possibly have a loud celebration when he was feeling so poorly. Dad agreed, saying we could celebrate another time. That other time never came. Instead of feeling hurt, I convinced myself that graduation parties were materialistic anyway. What mattered was the education, not the recognition, right? After college, I had opportunities. Real corporate jobs with starting salaries that would have given me independence and a future. But Linda came to me with tears in her eyes, explaining how the family business really needed help with bookkeeping and marketing. Dad was getting older, Marcus was still finding his footing, and wouldn't I want to help secure our family's legacy? So I moved back home and started working for free. For 6 years, I balanced the books, managed vendor relationships, and even developed marketing campaigns that brought in new clients. I told myself I was investing in my future, that when Dad retired, I'd have a stake in everything I'd helped build. Meanwhile, Marcus was given an executive position straight out of college despite having zero practical experience. He made costly mistakes that I quietly fixed, took credit for my marketing successes, and treated me like a secretary in front of clients. When I brought this up to Dad, he just said Marcus was learning, and I should be patient with family. My personal life suffered too. When I started dating David, someone I'd met through a business networking event, things got serious quickly. He was kind, ambitious, and he saw my potential in ways my family never did. For the first time, I felt valued and appreciated. But Linda noticed. She started making comments about how I was becoming distant, and putting a stranger before family. When David proposed, Linda took it upon herself to have a conversation with him. She told him I was mentally unstable, that I had family obligations that would always come first, and that I'd never be able to fully commit to a marriage, because I was too damaged by my mother's death. David broke up with me 2 days later. I was devastated, and Linda was there to comfort me, telling me he wasn't good enough anyway, and that the right man would understand my devotion to family. The final blow to my savings came when Marcus approached me with an investment opportunity. He needed 15 for what he called a sure-thing business venture. Against my better judgment, I loaned him the money I'd been saving to finally move out and start my own life. Months passed, and when I asked about repayment, Marcus got defensive. Linda accused me of being money-obsessed and trying to destroy family unity over a few dollars. She made me feel like a loan shark for wanting my own money back. I later found out through a mutual friend that Marcus had used the money to pay off gambling debts. Through all of this, Dad watched quietly. He never intervened, never defended me, never acknowledged my sacrifices. I interpreted his silence as approval of how I was being treated. Maybe I really was being too sensitive, too demanding, too focused on things that didn't matter. The saddest part was how normal it all felt. This systematic erosion of my self-worth happened so gradually that I didn't recognize it was happening. I made excuses for every slight, every unfairness, every moment of being treated as less than. I convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, that family meant putting everyone else's needs before your own, even when those people never reciprocated. When Dad collapsed from a heart attack at 58, his final words to me at the hospital were, "You've always been so strong, Sarah. You'll figure out how to handle everything." Even as he was dying, I was being given another burden to carry. Dad's funeral was supposed to be my chance to honor him, but it became another stage for my family's cruelty. While I was drowning in grief, making arrangements, and calling relatives, Linda and Marcus conveniently disappeared. Linda claimed she was too emotional to handle details, and Marcus said he needed to process his loss privately. So there I was, 28 years old, planning my father's funeral alone, while his wife and stepson hid from responsibility. I wrote a heartfelt eulogy about Dad's work ethic, his quiet strength, and how he'd built his construction business from nothing. I poured my heart into those words, sharing memories of the few times we'd connected. But the night before the service, Linda announced that Marcus would be delivering the eulogy instead. "It's more appropriate coming from the son," she said, as if I didn't exist. Marcus represents the family legacy now. I watched my stepbrother, who barely knew Dad beyond his bank account, stumble through my words, while I sat in the back row like a distant cousin. Extended family members kept approaching me, confused about why I looked so neglected at my own father's funeral. I found out later that Linda had been telling everyone I was going through a difficult phase and becoming unstable with grief. The flowers I'd carefully chosen were replaced with Linda's selections. The music I'd picked was changed. Even the obituary I'd written was rewritten to emphasize Marcus as Robert's beloved son and business successor, while I was mentioned as simply daughter Sarah. It was like they were erasing me from Dad's life story in real time. But I told myself this was grief talking. People handle loss differently. Linda was probably just trying to maintain control during chaos. Marcus was overwhelmed by suddenly becoming the head of the family. I made excuses even as they humiliated me at my father's funeral. 1 week later, we gathered at lawyer James Mitchell's office for the will reading. I arrived early, still believing that despite everything, Dad must have recognized my years of sacrifice. Maybe he'd leave me a portion of the business I'd helped build, or at least enough money to finally start my own life. Linda and Marcus arrived together, whispering and exchanging looks that made my stomach turn. They'd clearly discussed this beforehand, while I'd been left out of any conversations about Dad's estate. Marcus kept making jokes about finally getting what he deserved, and Linda kept telling me to prepare myself for reality. The extended family filled the small conference room, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd barely spoken to me in years, but suddenly appeared when money was involved. They avoided eye contact with me, and I noticed several of them smirking when they looked in my direction. When Mitchell began reading the will, my world collapsed piece by piece. Linda received $800,000 and the family house, the house where I'd lived in the basement for 16 years. Marcus inherited the entire construction business, valued at $2.1 million, the business I'd worked for free, the business I'd helped grow with my unpaid marketing and bookkeeping. Various relatives received meaningful keepsakes and cash gifts. Aunt Patricia got Dad's watch collection. Cousin Mike got his vintage car. Even distant relatives I barely knew received something substantial. Then came my turn. To Sarah, Mitchell read aloud, "I leave $1. And this note for someone who always claimed money didn't matter." The room erupted in barely contained laughter. Marcus didn't even try to hide his amusement, actually laughing out loud as he said Dad always knew who really contributed to this family. Linda's response was even more cutting. "Well, Sarah, you always said you didn't care about material things. Now you can prove it." Aunt Patricia, who'd ignored me for years, suddenly had opinions. "Maybe this will teach you to be more involved in family business." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been more involved than any of them, working for free, while they lived their separate lives. Cousin Mike held up the single-dollar bill with mock reverence. "At least you can frame it, Sarah. It'll make a great conversation piece." The humiliation was complete and intentional. They wanted me to suffer publicly, to be broken down in front of everyone who mattered to our family. This wasn't just about money, it was about making sure I knew exactly how little I'd always meant to them. For the first time in 16 years, the fog of denial lifted completely. I saw them clearly, not as flawed people who loved me imperfectly, but as cruel individuals who had systematically destroyed my life for their own benefit. Every excuse I'd made, every justification I'd created, every moment I'd convinced myself their treatment was normal, it all crumbled. I felt physically sick. Years of suppressed anger, hurt, and realization crashed over me like a wave. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and I could barely breathe. The room felt like it was spinning as the full weight of their betrayal hit me. I stood up to leave, accepting that I truly meant nothing to these people. 16 years of sacrifice, 6 years of free labor, thousands of dollars loaned, and never repaid, all of it reduced to $1 and a cruel joke. I was done making excuses for people who saw my kindness as weakness and my love as stupidity. But just as I reached the door, just as I was about to walk out of their lives forever, James Mitchell called out, "Sarah, please wait. There's something else." He pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's distinctive handwriting, along with specific instructions that made everyone freeze to be opened only if the first will results in Sarah receiving $1 or less. Marcus went pale. "What is that? Dad didn't mention anything else to me." Linda's voice cracked slightly. "This is highly irregular. We weren't told about any second envelope." Mitchell looked directly at me with something I hadn't seen in that room all day, genuine kindness and respect. "Your father was very specific about the timing and conditions for this envelope, Sarah." Even in that moment, I almost walked away. Part of me thought this might be another cruel joke, one final twist of the knife. But something in Mitchell's eyes convinced me to stay. He carefully opened the envelope and began reading a letter dated 3 years earlier. "My dearest Sarah, if you're hearing this, it means my family treated you exactly as I predicted they would at the first will reading." The room went completely silent. Mitchell's voice cut through the silence as he continued reading Dad's letter. "I have watched for years as Linda manipulated our family dynamic and Marcus grew entitled to things he never earned. But most importantly, I watched you sacrifice your dreams, your money, your relationships, and your self-worth for people who never deserved your loyalty. The first will was a test, Sarah. I needed to see if my death would bring out any decency in them, or if they would humiliate you even in your grief." Linda's face had gone white. Marcus was gripping his chair so hard his knuckles were turning pale. Mitchell continued, "Based on your presence here for this letter, I have my answer. What follows is my real will, written in sound mind and properly witnessed. The previous document, while legal, contains a nullification clause that activates under these exact circumstances." The lawyer pulled out an official document with multiple notarized pages. "Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, you are hereby granted the following: the entire Morrison Construction Company, including all assets, contracts, and business relationships. Additionally, you inherit $1.5 million from an investment account I've been building specifically for you, plus 3 rental properties Linda was unaware I owned." I couldn't process what I was hearing. The room started spinning, but this time from shock rather than humiliation. Furthermore, Mitchell continued, Marcus Morrison will receive exactly $1, as he has contributed $1 worth of actual value to this family. Linda Morrison's inheritance is revoked entirely due to violation of the dignity and respect clause outlined in Section 12. Marcus jumped up so fast his chair fell backward. This is impossible. You can't just change a will after someone dies. I'll contest this. Mitchell remained calm. Mr. Morrison, your stepfather anticipated this reaction. Everything has been legally structured for 3 years. There are multiple witnesses, psychiatric evaluations proving his competency, and detailed documentation of the events that led to his decision. Linda found her voice, though it shook with rage. Robert was clearly not in his right mind. Sarah manipulated him, turned him against his own family. Actually, Mitchell said, opening a thick folder. Robert documented every incident meticulously. The loan Sarah gave Marcus that was never repaid. The graduation celebration that was cancelled. The boyfriend Linda drove away. The years of unpaid labor. The systematic exclusion from family decisions. He witnessed everything. The letter wasn't finished. Mitchell kept reading. Sarah, you've spent 16 years believing I was blind to your treatment, but I saw everything. I chose strategic silence over confrontation because I knew Linda and Marcus would only improve their behavior temporarily. I needed proof of who they really were. More importantly, I needed you to find your strength. My hands were shaking as the full scope of Dad's plan became clear. I've arranged business mentorship with my most trusted advisors. I've secretly funded your therapy sessions. Yes, your insurance never covered them. I did. And I've established a scholarship fund in your name for daughters who've been overlooked by their families. Marcus was pacing frantically. There has to be something we can do. I'm his son. Stepson, Mitchell corrected coolly. And according to his documentation, you've had 22 years to prove your worth. The gambling debts, the borrowed money never repaid, the credit cards Robert secretly paid off, it's all here. Linda tried a different approach, suddenly tearful. Sarah, honey, surely you won't let this destroy our family. After everything I did to raise you, we can work this out. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely clear about who I was dealing with. Linda, you did raise me. You raised me to believe I wasn't worth basic respect. You raised me to think love meant accepting cruelty. You taught me that family meant sacrificing everything for people who gave nothing back. I stood up, feeling stronger than I ever had. Marcus, you can apply for an entry-level position like any other candidate. Your qualifications will be evaluated fairly, which is more than I ever received. The extended family members who had been smirking earlier were now trying to catch my attention, suddenly interested in reconnecting. Aunt Patricia started. Sarah, I always knew you were special. No, I cut her off. You knew I was useful. There's a difference. Mitchell handed me keys, bank information, and business documents. Your father also left instructions about company operations. He suggests keeping the current crew but replacing management immediately. 6 months later, my life was unrecognizable. The business was thriving under actual competent leadership. I implemented ideas I'd suggested for years that Marcus had dismissed. Revenue increased 30% in the first quarter alone. I started therapy, real therapy that I could finally afford, learning to set boundaries and recognize my worth. The hardest part was unlearning 16 years of programming that told me I deserved less than everyone else. Marcus did apply for a job at the company. He started in the mailroom at minimum wage, actually learning how the business operated from the ground up. To his credit, he seemed genuinely humbled by the experience, though I remained cautiously distant. Linda moved in with her sister, spending most of her time complaining to anyone who'd listen about ungrateful stepchildren and manipulated dying men. I started dating again, carefully this time, with clear standards about how I expected to be treated. It's amazing how differently people respond to you when you believe you deserve respect. Dad's final gift wasn't really the money or the business. It was showing me that my worth was never dependent on their approval. He spent 3 years documenting their cruelty, not just to justify his decision, but to show me that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't too sensitive, and I wasn't asking for too much. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are actually the ones holding you back the most. And sometimes, the parent you think doesn't see you is actually planning to give you everything you need to fly. The dollar bill from the first will. I did frame it, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as proof that rock bottom can be the foundation for everything better. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story or opinions in the comments.